Thank you so much. Well, thank you guys so much for having me. I am honored to be here, and I hope to provide you guys with some nutritional insights on how to eat healthier. Now, let me say, although this presentation is primarily geared to just general nutrition, I did hear that there was some interest with kind of the nutritional management of diabetes. So I will cover a few kind of tips and pointers throughout. And then if you guys have any questions, specifically related to diabetes or with the presentation itself, I will be more than happy to answer those after. So we'll get started. Okay. So just to give you an overview, I'm going to cover why nutrition is so important, and then a few general healthy eating tips. And then we're going to discuss which foods we should choose for best health, and then how to implement those foods in our diet. Okay, so I don't know about you guys, but I feel like almost every day we are getting inundated with contradicting nutrition information. It's like everyone on social media is, a nutritionist or some type of health coach. We're told Mediterranean diet, the paleo. I'm sure you guys have heard of keto. There are so many products in the grocery store now being marketed to keto. Intermittent fasting is new. Almost every day I have a patient asking me if we should do intermittent fasting. And if I wasn't a dietitian, I would be overwhelmed with all this information. So I'm hoping to give you guys some clarity on this today. So I feel like to get really back to the basics of nutrition, Michael Pollan is one of my favorite food journalists. I don't know if you guys have heard of him. He wrote In Defense of Food, An Omnivore's Dilemma, and I think he really summed it up best. He's one of his favorite quotes is, "Eat food, not too much, mostly plants." So what exactly is he saying here? Eat food. We really need to incorporate whole foods into our diet and stay away from all those processed foods. Not too much there. We're focusing on our portion sizes and really watching those. And then mostly plants. So really getting a good intake of fruits, vegetables, and all your legumes, the beans, peas, and lentils. So that's what we're going to try to do today, is how to implement this into our daily lives. So why is nutrition important? A good diet is essential in keeping us healthy across the lifespan. We know that if we eat a healthy diet, it's going to prevent all these chronic diseases such as heart disease, diabetes, obesity, cancer. I mean, we're even having significant increases, unfortunately, in childhood obesity and in childhood diabetes. So here's the problem. We know we should eat healthy to prevent chronic diseases. The problem is actually implementing a healthy diet, right? It's making those behavior changes that is so difficult. Now, if you have a hard time eating a healthy diet, do not beat yourself up. The food industry doesn't really make it easy. They have kind of developed those perfect concoctions of adding sugar and protein, sugar, sodium, and fat to kind of make food almost addictive. I hate to say it, but it can be addictive. So we know we need to make behavior changes with our food intake, but it is difficult. So when you're trying to make behavior changes, one thing I would recommend is keeping it simple. If we try to make drastic changes to our diet all at once, it's just really not sustainable. So I recommend doing small changes. If you're eating out 5 to 6 times a week, just try to eat maybe 3 or 4 times out. If you're drinking, 2 or 3 sodas a day, cutting back once a day. These small changes over time will make a big difference. And then secondly, when we're trying to incorporate healthy foods into the diet, you truly have to find foods that you enjoy. If you don't like a food, obviously it's not going to stay. So I would say explore with the different options that they have at the grocery store. The food industry is constantly coming out with new products experiment with them. The way we cook food, I tell people if you don't like something, it's just because you haven't had it cooked correctly. So experiment with different recipes. All right. So now we're going to discuss a few general healthy eating habits. So first we need to touch on when should we eat. I do feel we should eat 3 meals a day. Whatever time you wake up in the morning, within that first 2 hours, we should have breakfast or even put something small in your stomach, because research has shown you're more likely to make healthier choices throughout the day. And it also helps with blood sugar control. So about every 4 to 5 hours, we should have a meal. This is why when you are hungry, we make poor decisions. You never want your body to get to what I call like that starvation point. So if someone skips breakfast, you skip lunch, you're not going to say, you know, I would just like a grilled chicken salad for dinner. You are going to eat something high in fat and high in sugar, and you're probably going to end up at McDonald's. So the first step in the eating healthy is not letting your body get to the point of starvation. Next, this one is even hard for me sometimes, is try not to eat after dinner. So a lot of people are snacking after dinner, and that can put on 15 pounds in a year. Our hormones are elevated at night, your cortisol level, your growth hormone, and that is more likely to store your food. So if we're trying to watch our weight, try not to eat after dinner. One tidbit on snacks, you don't have to have a snack, but you should kind of have a snack in one of two instances. First, if you're biologically hungry, we'll have a snack. That's your body telling you you're hungry. Just don't snack out of boredom or for emotional reasons. And then 2, have a snack if you're going to go for a prolonged period of time. So if you go longer than 6 to 7 hours between a meal, then I would recommend having a snack. Next, do not drink your calories. This is for people who have diabetes and people who don't. I brought my little model from work. This is how much sugar is in a 12-ounce can of soda, and juice has just as much sugar. We really want to stay away from that, because the more sugar intake you have, the more sugar you crave. It is also very inflammatory in the body. Also, the sodas and the juice will spike the blood sugar up very high, and that kind of burns our pancreas out. We're producing a lot of insulin to get that sugar down. And if we have a lot of extra insulin floating around, it's an anabolic hormone, meaning it will put weight on us. So I highly recommend all your drinks need to be calorie-free or diet versions. And I would definitely make most of the time try to drink water. Okay, so next is eat at home. I wrote this 3 times to really drive home that message. If we consume meals at home, you cut your calories in half, you cut the sodium in half, and you cut the fat in half. Also, if we're eating at restaurants, we tend to overeat. If you paid $50 for a steak dinner, you're going to, want to get your money's worth. So try to eat at home most of the time. Also, I recommend having at least 3 what I call fast food items in your freezer. So if you have a hectic work week and you don't have time to cook, you can grab something out of your freezer rather than going to fast food. For instance, it could be a frozen pizza and then just pair it with a salad or some steamer vegetables. I'm from New Orleans. We love beans. I batch cook red beans, keep them in my freezer, and then pull those out on a busy night. So try to eat at home most of the time. Next is getting a good night's sleep. Most people do not realize the correlation between our sleep habits and nutrition. So research shows if we don't get 7 to 8 hours of sleep, we consume 500 extra calories a day. You crave high sugar, high fat, and you tend to snack more. So really shoot for 7 to 8 hours of sleep every night. Next is, even if we have a good diet, to really prevent those chronic diseases, we need to get in some aerobic activity. So if you are trying to prevent diabetes, if you are trying to maintain your weight, you want to shoot for 150 minutes per week, and that is the minimum. The good news is you can accumulate that however you would like. I also would say you need to do weight training twice a week, and I find that's where most people fall short. If we do weight training, that is going to increase your lean muscle mass. The higher muscle mass we have, the increase you have in your metabolic rate, which is going to help you either maintain your weight or lose weight if that is your goal. And lastly, it is very important that we meal plan and go to the grocery store. So every week going to the grocery store, it's an absolute must. And honestly, there's no excuses anymore. You can do grocery store pickup, we can have them delivered to our house, but try to go there on a weekly basis. And also we need to meal plan, take a few minutes to write down your meals. That's why, you won't be spending money on frivolous items at the store. It also helps keep you on track. A few things I try to tell my patients to do with meal planning is make a list of just your staple foods. And that takes away the planning through the week. You already know what you need. And then make a dinner list. So what I do is I have 80 plus dinner ideas all listed out. If I have a recipe for those, I keep them in a folder. And that takes away that dreaded thought of, what are we going to cook this week? And then you don't get in a rut of eating the same foods over and over again. Okay, so now we're going to discuss which foods we should choose to eat. So all these delicious foods that we love in this world break down into one of three macronutrients in the body, which are carbohydrates, proteins, or fats. So first, we're going to talk about carbohydrates. These are all the wonderful foods that give our body energy. So those are all the grains that we like to eat, fruits, vegetables, legumes, and milk. So first, let's talk about grains. A lot of times we are told we should consume whole grains, but I find most people don't even know what that is. So these, I have listed just a few examples of what whole grains are. So we hear we should eat them, but what are we really getting? What are the benefits of getting a whole grain? So I'm going to get a little nerdy and we're going to go over the anatomy of a grain. So if you have a whole grain, you get all three parts of the grain: the bran, the endosperm, and the germ. Now, what nutrients is this providing us? All your B vitamins, which are thiamine, niacin, riboflavin. You get fiber. Our powerhouse antioxidants are found in the whole grains, which are selenium, vitamin E, iron, zinc, which is so important for our immune system. 40 plus phytochemicals are all found in the whole grain, primarily in the bran and the germ. Now, when we eat that white rice that everyone loves and the white bread that tastes so good, what they do is they strip the bran and the germ, and you're essentially left with the endosperm, which is mostly the sugar, right? So when you're choosing grains, most of the time we want to choose the whole grains. So brown rice and wild rice are good options. If you don't like those, whole grain basmati rice is a great one. Now, some people come to me and they're like, Julie, I only like white rice. So let's think how we can make that healthier. Pair it with protein, and that's going to slow the digestion. You could also take white rice, cook it, put it in your fridge for 24 hours, and then reheat it. And it kind of changes to what's called a resistant starch. So it's digested a lot slower. Oatmeal is a great whole grain. Steel cut oatmeal specifically is digested slower. Quinoa, whole wheat pasta. Now, a lot of my patients will come to me and they're like, it has a gritty taste. I don't like it. I recommend trying angel hair whole wheat pasta. It is very thin, and most of the time people don't taste a texture. They also have a lot of what are called lentil-based pastas on the market. That's another great option to choose. When it comes to bread, whole wheat bread is your best option. Specifically, it's called sprouted whole grain bread. It's going to be digested the slowest and have what's called the lowest glycemic index. One version on the market is called Dave's Killer Bread. You could try that. Or whole grain sourdough is actually digested really slowly. And those are primarily found in the freezer section at the grocery store. Okay, so next we're going to discuss our non-starchy vegetables. This should be the bulk of your plate when we're eating. So half of your plate you want to be from non-starchy vegetables. These are very low in calories and they're very nutrient dense. So examples would be broccoli, carrots, cauliflower, okra, tomatoes, bell peppers, all your salad. Also, you want to eat the rainbow. Different colors of the vegetables are going to provide our body with different phytochemicals and polyphenols. So like lycopene we get from the red fruits, beta carotene you're going to get from the orange. Because what I find is a lot of people are eating the same vegetables every week. So really try to get a variety in there. Also, if we want to prevent heart disease, if you want to prevent cancer, you need to eat the dark leafy green vegetables 3 to 4 times per week to really get in all those nutrients. Personally, one way I get in my leafy greens is I have a salad every day, and I put my avocado and feta cheese in there because that's something I enjoy. So I'm able to get in my greens most of the time. Now, let's discuss some modifications. If you're not a big vegetable eater, I don't care what it takes for you to eat the vegetable. If you have to add butter to it, if you have to put cheese on top, if you have to dip it in a salad dressing, that is perfectly fine. I would rather you eat the vegetable than not eat the vegetable. Unfortunately, the CDC says only 1 out of 9 adults are hitting the recommendations for vegetables. And I see it. Some of my patients, the only vegetable they will eat is a tomato on a hamburger. So we really need to increase our intake. Also, it doesn't matter what form the vegetable is from, whether they're fresh, whether they're frozen, whether it's canned. It really, the nutritional content across the board does not matter. Actually, I think one of the most underrated things are canned vegetables. They are convenient, they are relatively cheap, and they're quick. You know, I would rather you eat the vegetable than not get it. And again, we want to make half of our plate from the non-starchy vegetables. So starchy vegetables, let's discuss these. This is probably the biggest misconception across the board with nutrition. Patients come to me all the time, I can't eat, you know, beans and sweet potatoes and corn because they're quote carby, or someone's trying to lose weight, and they feel like they shouldn't have these foods. And that is really a big misunderstanding. The beans, the peas, the lentils, all of the legumes are truly one of the healthiest carbohydrates we can eat. They are digested so slowly, they do not spike the blood sugar, which is good. That helps us aid in the satiety factor, and it prevents, you know, elevated blood sugars. These foods are very high in protein. They're high in fiber. 1 cup of beans or lentils is going to give you half your intake of fiber. I also try to encourage people to eat sweet potatoes. White potatoes get a bad rap. There is nothing wrong nutritionally with a white potato, but to slow the digestion of potatoes, I tell people leave the skin on there. And that will slow the digestion. Also, eating it cold, like potato salad, will slow the digestion. Corn, it gets a bad rap. Corn is a whole grain. So all those nutrients we just discussed, you also get those in corn. And then lastly, fruits. So same thing with misconception with fruits. People think I have diabetes, I'm trying to cut my carbs. And let's give it perspective. Fruit is Mother Nature. It is a whole food. It has no sodium. It has no fat. It is low in calories. It is nutrient dense, high in fiber. You need to have 2 to 3 fruits per day. Now, if you have diabetes or pre-diabetes, what I would recommend is having fruit for your snack, and that way you can have more starches at your meal. But also try to eat a variety of fruits. Berries are the best. So what I do is I have berries for one of my snacks, and then I alternate my fruit at my next snack. So try to get your fruits in there. And if you don't like vegetables, I tell people at least bump up your fruit intake to really get your nutrients in. All right, so next we're going to discuss proteins. Proteins are like building blocks in your body. Your muscles, your hormones, your enzymes are all made from proteins. However, we should go lean with your proteins. So here, beef category, purchasing like 93.7 ground beef would be a better option, to where if you're eating at a restaurant and you get a hamburger there, they're serving you 70-30 ground beef, which is much higher in the saturated fat content. Again, this is reiterating why we should eat at home so we can control these factors. roast, sirloin, tenderloin, or lean options to try to help you remember. Anything ends in loin is lean. Your poultry is lean as long as we're not eating the skin on it. So chicken and turkey, whether it's the dark or the white meat, really it's insignificant calorie difference. As long as you don't have the skin, that's fine. A pork loin or pork chop or the tenderloin are lean options. All your seafood is lean unless you're having it fried. So I would also encourage you to do plant-based proteins. Again, this is the beans, peas, tofu, all your nuts and seeds. Quinoa is a great source. One thing I am seeing kind of an uptick in is these processed meat substitutes. I would proceed with caution with those. It can be very high in the sodium and very high in saturated fat. So regards to portions, obviously that's individualized, but I would say for most women, you should have 2 to 4 ounces per meal. Men, about 3 to 5 ounces per meal. And what I find a lot is people aren't having enough protein at their meal. Protein takes 4 to 5 hours to digest. So it really aids in the satiety factor. You need to make sure you're having enough protein at each meal. So next, our fats. So fats are very valuable in that we need them for the brain. They help us absorb your fat-soluble vitamins, which are A, D, E, and K. They kind of cushion your organs. Now, fats are energy dense, meaning they provide a lot of calories in a very small amount. So just to give you an example, 1 gram of carbohydrate is going to give you 4 calories. 1 gram of protein is going to give you 4. 1 gram of fat is going to give you 9 calories. So we have to be mindful of how much fat we are having in the diet, because that is where most people are going over with their calories. I just had a patient today who was eating an entire cup of peanuts, and she goes, "But I thought nuts are good." And I said, "They are good, but that's like 700 calories in nuts." So if you have a problem with controlling your weight and you're not sure why, I would recommend using Lose It app, LOSEIT, or MyFitnessPal. Those are great apps. They're user-friendly. They're both free, but it really helps give you a good idea of your intake and your caloric intake, because most of the time we're going over with fats. So which fats should we choose? First are called the monounsaturated fats. So I like to think mono means number 1. So think these are the best. So avocados, nuts and nut butters, olive oil, peanut oil are some good options. And then your olives. But still, watch the serving of those. So I tell people, if you're cooking with oil, keep it to a teaspoon. A lot of times we have the wrong mentality. My husband, we're cooking and he's putting the olive oil on the asparagus, and he used like almost half a cup. And I'm like, "Oh my goodness, that's too much." And he goes, "But this is the healthy oil." I'm like, "Yes, it is healthy, but all fats across the board are still providing us with the same amount of calories." So be mindful of the serving sizes. We want to limit what is called saturated fats. These are the fats that increase your LDL level. So think LDL is lousy. You don't want it to be high, because if your numbers are high, that is the fat that clogs your arteries. So saturated fat is primarily found in butter, lard, palm oil, your high-fat dairy, cheese, ice cream, the skin on chicken. That's where you're going to get the saturated fats. Unfortunately, guys, chocolate is high in saturated fats. So be mindful and try to limit those. And then next, we really want to increase our intake of omega-3 fatty acids. These are essential fatty acids because we do not make them in the body. You have to get them from the food sources. So some good food sources are salmon, mackerel, tuna, sardines, walnuts, ground flaxseed. If you don't like any of those, your dark green leafy vegetables, another reason to incorporate those, can give you some omega-3 fatty acids. If, however, you do not like any of those, I would suggest you taking a supplement. One other tidbit on fats with prediabetes and diabetes management. You really want to be careful of the fat intake because insulin does not work well in the presence of a high fat meal. So if we eat a carbohydrate meal, but it's from a restaurant or fast food, the sugar is going to increase and the sugar is going to stay elevated if it's high in fat, and we don't want that. So if you have prediabetes or type 2, you really want to monitor your fat intake. Okay, so now that we've kind of discussed which foods to choose, let's discuss how to balance our meals with those foods. So this is called the plate method, just to kind of give you a visual. So half of our plate should be from the true vegetables or fruits. A fourth of your plate should be from the lean proteins, or this could be the legumes, the beans, the peas, the lentils, and then make a fourth of your plate the whole grains. And if you're worried about blood sugar control or your weight, I tell people a simple rule is to keep it to a cup. You can have a cup of pasta, a cup of rice, and you will be okay. One thing I see a lot of time is that diet mentality. Patients will come to me and they'll say, well, I want to lose weight really quickly. I'm just going to eat the vegetables and the protein. And they're going to eliminate, the grains, the whole grains. And I'm like, okay, if that's what you want, sure. So they come back and I'm like, well, how did it go? And they'll say, well, I lost weight, but I've gained it back. Let me explain why this happens. Vegetables are digested in 1 to 2 hours. Protein does take 4 to 5 hours, but it's not enough to actually fill you up, right? It doesn't give us that satiety factor. So previously what I said, when you don't have the carbohydrates, you're hungry, and then we make poor decisions. So what happens? They eat vegetables, they eat protein, and it doesn't hold them over, and then they're having a bowl of ice cream or a bowl of cereal before bedtime because they were starving and their hormones make them crave food. To where if you just would have balanced the dinner and had the vegetables with the protein, but you had a cup of black-eyed peas or a cup of whole wheat pasta, that is going to hold you over. So it helps with not overeating. So just in summary, I personally feel like the best kind of nutritional approach is the Mediterranean eating plan. It is tried and true. It has been studied more than any other diet, and it has been shown across the board to decrease our risk of the cancers, strokes, heart disease, Alzheimer's, and even diabetes. So the kind of daily food intake is pretty much what we discussed. It's high in whole grains, vegetables, and fruits. Water is the main beverage. They do limit red meat and processed foods. Just to kind of discuss here, it's not so much that red meat is inherently bad, it's the processed red meats that we know are the known carcinogens, right? So it's like bacon, sausage, bologna, pastrami, salami, pepperoni. Those are the foods we really want to avoid. But they do limit the red meat and the processed meat, and desserts are also limited. They usually do fruit for a dessert, and then beans and lentils, and then fish are usually the most common protein. And then their fat source is from extra virgin olive oil and nuts and seeds. So back to the basics, a Mediterranean eating plan is a great diet. And if you still feel overwhelmed, Michael Pollan says, if your great grandmother didn't eat it, then neither should you.